I want to call to order the May 2nd, 2019 Board of Adjustment meeting. We are supposed to have 5. We'll do some housekeeping business in the meantime before we open the public hearing, and hopefully our 5th member will be present shortly. We do have April 4th, 2019 meeting minutes to review and approve. Have all folks gone through the minutes? Have any problems, recommendations for revisions, additions, deletions, etc.?
Do you want to go ahead and appoint the alternate members for this meeting? Now that we have someone that can motion and second that? Okay.
Let the other guy come. I should say that the regular members of the Board of Adjustment are Joel Schreiberg, David Kelly, myself, Michael Marsh, who could not be present, so Cindy Burnett, to my right, is sitting in on his seat, and Julia Latham, who is absent and excused, and Jeremy Hooper is sitting in her seat. We need to have a motion by the original members to seat both Cindy and Jeremy for this meeting and this hearing. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Moved by David Kelly, seconded by Joel. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You're now official. Let's go back to the April minutes. Anybody have any changes, additions, deletions, etc.? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the April 4th, 2019 Board of Adjustment meeting minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Kelly, seconded by Mr. Schreiberg. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I need a motion now to recess the regular meeting to go into public hearing number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kelly, seconded by Mr. Hooper. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're now in a public hearing number 1. And Alex, would you please introduce the application?
I guess now would be a prudent time to swear in parties who are expected to provide any of the testimony for the variance.
Good idea. The applicants will come forward, please. And are there any other individuals that intend to speak in behalf of this application? I would ask that you also come forward to be sworn. Let me have your names, I guess, from right to left.
John Baranth, Moore County Schools.
Thank you.
Alex Cameron, Senior Planner.
Brent Covington, Ratio Architects.
Joel 2, property owner, 215 Everett Road.
Thank you. Would all of you please raise your right hand? Do you all solemnly swear or affirm to the testimony that you're about to receive is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? That's all affirmative. Thank you. Now we need brief description of the application.
All right, so the purpose of public hearing number one before the Board of Adjustment is to receive testimony for a variance request from Section 9.2A, Tables of Dimensional Requirements of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance for the property at 100 Dundee Road. This property is further identified as Moore County Parcel ID number 000248884. This property is located within the R10 high-density residential zoning district, and specifically the owners, Moore County Board of Education, are requesting a variance from the 35-foot maximum building height to allow for the construction of a new elementary school. And within board members' packet, you should receive the application for the request for the variance, elevations, first floor plan, second floor plan, mechanical plan, roof plan, staff report, and your written decision that will need to accompany any motion and decision by the Zoning Board of Adjustment tonight. In addition to that material that was provided to you guys just before the meeting, I was able to make copies of a site plan that's associated with the current general concept plan that's under review by TRC before it comes to you guys, so you can better orient the proposal and the location of the building on the site itself in relation to the property and adjoining property lines.
Thank you. Before we get into testimony, I need to know if any board members have any concerns about their ability to participate in this discussion and hearing. Has anyone had any ex parte communication with anyone concerning the matter? And if so, let's hear about it. All right, there's been no untoward discussion by board members. I want to remind the people that will be giving testimony that your testimony has to be factual, pertinent, pertaining to this application, and facts only. Opinions will be heard, but will probably be discarded unless you're a professional. So with that brief explanation of what we're talking about and how we're going to talk about it, Mr. Barath, you as the applicant's representative have the floor, but I need to ask you, are you a registered architect?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And let's have your story.
Thank you for this opportunity to come before you with this request. I am actually going to allow our project architect to present to you the request in full. I assume you're not going to go through these, or are these just for our reference?
These are for reference by
Okay.
the board, you guys, or anyone
Okay.
in attendance.
Just want to make sure the process here. Thank you. So I'm going to let Brent Covington walk you through this. One of the
Bring the microphone closer to you. It's
I'm sorry.
being videotaped, and the tape needs to hear what you're saying.
Very good. I hope that's better. And so one of the things you will find in this application is the challenge we have of a school within the designated residential community, and that's where the request for the height for the variance. To accommodate this school to be located on this site, we must have a two-story solution for classrooms. It is a very confined site, very small, to be for us to build the need that we have for this new facility of 800 students. And so through the two-story solution, we have also tried to be sensitive to how it addresses the community at large. We, as you will tell by the site plan, how it sets back from Dundee Road, trying to maintain some of the natural trees and frontage that are along Dundee Road to act as some screening and scaling of the facility as well. The facility itself is a all brick school, stays in context with the intent of schools in the community and with our historic preservation. That's done, right? Yes, as well. So I'm going to let Brent take you through the design itself here, along with the final request.
So if you're looking at, you can use the site plan concept as a reference. If you're looking at the site plan concept, you can see the main presence or main entrance is going to front Dundee Road. You're looking at well in excess of over 70 feet from curb to front of the building. And then also you're setting off or setting back from Kelly Road. The massing of that front more linear element, that is your classroom tower. That's going to be the tallest structure in the project. And as you can see from the elevations, as you get to the eastern and western portions of that, it scales back down to a single story to do as much as we can to accommodate pedestrian scale for the road and then also residential neighbors. On the back end, you can see that there's a thin connector between the classroom tower. That's the lobby connector, and that'll be the main entrance for both bus riders and for public access after hours for those who want to use media center, dining, and gym. So once you move past that to the south, you have, like I said, you have the media center, you have dining, includes, of course, a commercial kitchen, you have robotics, arts, music, and then you have your gym, which is that portion that faces towards the multi-purpose field. And the multi-purpose field, we wanted to keep it as much shielded from the street as possible to be mindful of school children's privacy and safety. It's probably worth noting at this point that, John has been heading several different elementary school construction projects. Those sites are significantly larger. And speaking with Roger Leeson earlier today, he would say that in some cases, those sites, in terms of acreage, were twice that of this site. This site has functioned as a public school for over 50 years. We feel it's important that it remains that way, but we have to make certain accommodations in order to be able to provide the program, the Moore County School Standard Program for 800 students. Other things that have impacts on that would be pick up and drop off. You see that sort of loop road that works across the front of the building. That's well over 1,000 feet, and that's a NCDOT requirement based on the student numbers.
As Brent said, it's a small site. We have a large building. Use a round number, 120,000 square feet. Making the classroom structure 2 wings allows us to accommodate a lot of traffic off of the roadways onto the site, provide adequate parking for buses and for staff, for deliveries, for waste, etc., as well as still maintaining the opportunity for open multi-purpose play field and play equipment, and still try to be sensitive to the surroundings by maintaining as much of that natural buffer landscaping along the roadways and enhancing it. One thing you don't have here in front of us is the conceptual landscape plan where we continue to enhance the properties. The setting back of the building, as I mentioned earlier, helps to address the massing relative to Dundee. And as Brent pointed out, how the ends of that scale down, and you can see that on the elevations that are on the screen, on the bottom and the top elevation, how that 2-story wing is brought inward, and then at the ends of them, we step it down to a single story, and that provides sensitivity of scale to the community at large. And then how the major structure to the south, being the more public areas, as Brent outlined, are the ones that have a lower roof to the back, and that's to the reflect also to the adjacent properties to the south. We also, I want to
Excuse me, I'm
oh,
sorry.
Please.
an elementary school is permitted in this zone, is it not?
It is.
Yes.
But it requires special use permit and conditions?
There are special requirements, and it's basically lot size. It must be on a site greater than 4 or 5 acres.
What would be the usual required acreage for a school of this size to serve the number of students that are projected?
If we are looking for a single-story solution, you'd be looking at just over 22 acres.
And that's a standard established by whom?
That is the lease that we were able to do in the Aberdeen school project. It's the same size, 800 student, and the smallest site that we could put that on, along with the requirements for play structures, a multi-purpose field, is just over 22 acres.
Is that a state mandated size requirement, or?
There is not a state mandated. They have suggested sizes for acres of school for number of students. And of course, each municipality, depending on the use of their facilities, adjusts accordingly.
Okay, for this site, with this building size, do you meet the hard surface coverage requirement of the zone?
Are you referring to the impervious?
The impervious,
Yeah, that will be issued, we just applied for that as a separate consideration for a variance. And our civil is still working on the exact percentage of what is required.
you don't know what the exact percentage is yet?
Well, that's being adjusted. What we know is that the maximum is 40%. At the current design reflects 45%, but our civil engineer is working to reduce that as much as she can.
I understand that there has been a date set, or at least the provision made for a special meeting to consider that application.
Yes, it has.
Has that date been set, Alex?
That date has not been set relative to what I'm understanding was a special called meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for the general concept plan review, not necessarily the impervious surface coverage issue that has recently been arose. That will be able to be accommodated at the June 6th Board of Adjustment meeting based on the deadline that the applicant met today to get that application in.
Are all the other lot setback requirements met with this application?
According to what we have presented, it is in our opinion that they have been.
The latest review of the general concept plan did indicate a labeling discrepancy on the rear setback, but the structure itself does set within the allowable setback. So there are no issues with that.
What's considered the rear of the lot?
We would consider the lot line there that abuts to properties fronting Everett Road the rear.
What's the required setback?
I believe it's 25 feet,
And that's met?
correct?
Thank you. Will this building be constructed on a slab or crawl space or basement or
No,
what?
there will not be any occupiable spaces or any spaces below grade.
So it'll be on a slab?
A slab on grade with the elevated second floor.
I notice an elevator will be constructed.
Yeah, of course.
Hydraulic, I presume?
You're doing a single holeless, correct, in there? Single holeless elevator that does not have the boring down to put the piston in the ground. It is just a service pit. It's considered called a holeless hydraulic.
What is causing the need for the 44-foot 10-inch roof height?
The pitch of the roof. And by going to a slope roof system is generating that. We, of course, having the 2 stories and then putting the pitched roof on there. What we have discovered is that the standing seam metal roof systems, not only do they serve well for maintaining water flowing off the structure, not relying on interior drainage to the building, This also simplifies and helps us with our operational needs for the building long-term. What we've referred to as typically a flat roof requires higher levels of maintenance on there to make sure drains aren't clogged. Anytime you penetrate a roof, you run the risk of leaks over time occurring there, whereas the pitch roof has proven time and time again to be a sustainable solution for operations and for needs. And so as a standard, we have adopted the approach to put standing seam slope metal roofs on our structures at every possible chance. We did end up at the low ends, the single-story ends of that two-classroom wing on either end, with a small area of low-slope flat roof system in there. And that was just so that those roofs did not have to climb as high and try to keep the scale down. So in this instance, we made an exception to the ends to try to make sure that as the building stepped down at the ends, we are sensitive to the scale.
What are the ceiling heights on the first and second floors?
That would depend on what space, but it's probably more pertinent to talk about the floor-to-floor heights. And the floor-to-floor heights, which is standard amongst several counties, is typically 14 feet 8. So as
For what reason?
Top of slab, to accommodate structure and modern HVAC, electrical, and data.
So all the, let's say, utilities are in the plenum? What's in the attic?
The main mechanical systems, the DOAS systems. So your conditioning systems are up there to get them up and in an enclosed space so you can have a lot longer life for those pieces of equipment, and also get it off of the ground and off of the property so you can use the space as much as possible.
Bring the microphone up.
So that 14-foot, 4-inch height standard, is that a building code standard?
14.8.
14.8, forgive me. Is that a building code standard that you had mentioned?
That's something that at least I can speak for our architecture firm, have determined is an optimum distance 4-to-4 height when you accommodate modern mechanical systems.
Something that's common in the area. Okay.
Where
More
the
than- More
air-
than just the area, it is common across the industry, multiple school districts across the state, when you have multiple level.
Thank you. Is there any standard, any written standards in any building codes or anything that state that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Where are the air handling units?
They're up in the mechanical space.
In the attic? No thought to have some other kind of roof shape or system to
We-
try and, let's say, minimize the height
Well,
variance?
from my perspective, really the only other solution that would potentially reduce the building, but I don't know if it would get us under that 35 feet, would to go to a flat roof system, and that's not allowed in Historic Preservation District.
Something like a mansard wouldn't work?
I can't speak to, I can't speak to that.
Let me ask a question that backs us up just a little bit. You had mentioned also that the drop-off loop was regulated by by a DOT standard, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, do you have that standard with you or that regulation that maybe you could present to us as a board?
I do not, but that would be part of the site concept submission and that review.
All right, so that standard or that regulation has been submitted to the village at some point?
That's in part tied in with their discussions with MSTA, and also we've used Ramey Kemp to do analysis of the traffic requirements for that area.
Thank you. We just don't have it to view it today, is that right? We just don't have,
That's
we're not
correct.
able to take a look at that regulation today.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
The MOU, the memorandum of understanding of the scope, was just settled on recently, and Ramey Kemp is in the process of assembling the traffic impact analysis now, and that will be submitted just at a later date.
Thank you.
Questions, board?
Were you able to meet requirements for playgrounds, parking, drop-off on this small lot with this building the way that it is, or are you having to modify other standards to fit this property?
The standards you refer to are more or less suggestions by North Carolina Department of Instruction, School Construction Division, and they have recommendations for areas and for such. We believe that right now what we have proposed meets the needs that we have as Moore County Schools, and with every intent. I have not done a side-by-side comparison to the school planning department's recommendation. We are in a situation that we have an existing site. This happens all the time throughout the state. You can go into Wake County, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Guilford, and such. You have an existing site, and you accommodate everything you can to the best of the abilities of that site.
22 acres to 5 acres you're taking some great design to get everything in there, so I commend you on that.
Most efficient use of all property that we can. We even evaluated certain aspects of site drainage as far as pervious pavement solutions and such, and due to the quality of the site, we found those were not beneficial. So we have evaluated and exhausted most everything that we could here to try to fit and accommodate everything possible out here.
I'm sure this doesn't fit in your realm of a professional architect, but do you have any sort of facts that we could consider regarding the safety of students on such a small space? It's definitely a lot going on when you consider the parking lots, the size of the building. Is there anything that we can consider from fact and from that basis on whether or not the students giving in this size of space are safe?
As an architect and as the owner's representative here, I'm happy to respond to that. It's a great question, and it's something that we do take serious in all our designs and activities throughout the school, safety first. If you could pull the site plan up for me, I'd like to walk you through it, and then we'll go to the building itself and how we've addressed the topics of that. These have always come up as first priorities in every project site assessment that we do when we even consider new sites, is safety of the region.
We don't have a digital copy that was included with this submittal of the site plan. That's why I was able to get those hard copies distributed. So each board member should have one, and I think a couple of parties in the audience have one, so if you could
Very good.
follow along.
I will walk you through it this way then. The first thing I want to point out, and first and foremost, is you're looking at one building. You're not looking at multiple separate buildings. You're looking at one. That means you're able to have controlled single entry access points throughout the school facility. So you have one and not multiple. The other thing is you look at the site. The way the site is laid out, we have on the north side off of Dundee, you have, this is considered where the public entry point is. This is where the parent pick, my time is up. This is where the public entry student pickup drop-off occurs. And during the school day, if parents are coming or volunteers are coming to the school, this is where they would enter the building on the front. And there's only one place that they can enter. And when we get to the plan here, I'll go into that in greater detail. Off of Kelly Road, this is our bus and staff side where they will be able to come in and enter the building. And so there's a sidewalk that leads up to that connector that Brent talked about between the two-story classroom wing and the other spaces, and that's a controlled entry point as well. So you have in the morning, your parent pick drop-offs coming in off of Kelly on the front at one entry point. You have your buses coming in off of, if I said that backwards, I apologize, Dundee. Coming off there, and then off of Kelly, you have your bus students being dropped off and brought in right there. The site itself, too, when you look at it, look at where the multipurpose play field is. It is pulled back away from the roadways. It is pulled back into the corner of the site, so it's more protected visually from the public ways, which are your roadways, and with the property fencing around the sides. So we keep the play area in a space that's easily to observe and see where everyone is. The elevations of the building, you'll see large windows throughout it for clear lines of sight. There's not a lot of obstructions of access points where people come and approach the building. We also are going to be installing video surveillance systems throughout the whole facility, as well as electronic access control. Basically, that means you need a key fob to be using the doors. When you look at the plan itself, at the top would be Dundee, and you can see where you come into the entry point. You cannot get, I'll back up a minute. First rule, don't let people in the building unless you want them to come in. So when you come up to the building during school hours, you cannot open the door and walk freely in. You will ring a button. There's a communicator and a camera there, and you will identify yourself and why you're there, and then the secretary receptionist will let you in. You come into a controlled vestibule lobby. You cannot proceed through that lobby into the school. The only way is to come into the reception to the right to this image. At that point, you're registered in, you're given your visitor status, and you are released through another door into the school. It's all about controlling the access from that point. Our video surveillance cameras will provide live feeds to TVs that are stationed in the office, at the principal's office. We will have in here an office for an SRO officer, should one ever be provided for each and every school, but they rotate right now, and at the reception and the assistant principal. So in a lot of rooms, you will have monitors that'll be displaying sequences of video. So you'll have ability to monitor throughout the day. So the key is access control, leaving it simple that way. Once you get in the building, to keep it confined and safe, and then to keep the outdoor spaces reflective of that as well. We have other measures that we have incorporated into this that we do not publicize. I can just make that statement at this point. We don't want to advertise some of the other situations for obvious safety reasons.
So you've incorporated safety into some of the architectural design of the school. If you changed any of the footprint of this school, in your opinion as an architect, would it enhance or in any way safety, or would it take away any safety? Would it affect safety in any way of the children?
That we went through that exercise in the very beginning, because originally in this plan, that large mass to the south of the floor plan of the gym, the media center and all, was moved to the right and it was centered. So it was almost a symmetrical building that way. And very early we realized that that created compromises in safety and opportunities. And so by shifting that mass further to the left and turning this more into almost an L-shaped solution, we're able to keep clear lines of sight in confined areas.
Are there any footprint changes that you could make that would lower the roof height?
I cannot think of any. Brent?
No, I cannot think of any either.
David?
I have a few. So the 800 students, which kind of drives the plan dimension, and then ultimately the site constraints drive the second story, where does the 800 students come from?
That's Board of Education set that as the size for the 4 new elementary schools to accommodate growth.
So that's not related to the Pinehurst Development Comprehensive Plan or number of lots or families or projections or anything like that? It's just, this is an elementary school size?
It is an elementary school size,
Okay.
correct.
And then I'm imagining the classroom sizes are driven by student-teacher ratios, and then K through 5, right? So probably a slightly different in K and maybe K1, and then a little different 2, 3, 4, 5. And so,
Yes.
yeah, okay. So they look pretty standard, the classrooms. That's why I was asking. So, okay, understood. The The pitch of the standing seam metal roof, it looks like it's 1 to 3. Is there something driving the 1 to 3, or could you go 1 to 6 and make it lower? Or is it a function of the number of air handling units and the size that's needed in the attic space?
Depending on where you are in the building and what it needs to accommodate, you hit it on the head that in some cases, we need to make sure we need to maintain our clearances for the pieces of equipment up in the mechanical space. But really the main driver is when we don't have other conflicts, is the recommended standards, manufacturing standards for a standing metal seam roof so it performs properly.
Okay, understood. So that's part of what's driving the height. And then completely understand what you were talking about with regard to the mechanical equipment, and if you have it outside mounted or fenced in, et cetera, et cetera. Also safety reasons as well, getting that out of there where somebody can't get at the air handlers or something. So understand. Thank you.
If you haven't, I encourage each of you to take a look at the video that Ratio Architects has put together. We presented, I forget right now which Board of Education meeting, but I'm happy to provide that meeting link to you all so you can see it. It helps to give a sense of scale and sight lines to the building itself because it's run through at pedestrian levels.
Thank you. You have some comments. You are welcome now.
Thank you, sir. Joel, too, again, for the record. My wife and I are the owners at 215 Everett Road. We're one of the ones on the south side or the rear of the school. The entity ownership is Hedgehog Development Company, which is our entity. I'm here because the notice didn't tell us how much the height variance request was for, and there was no site plan available, so it was really hard to determine where is the building footprint, what impact is it going to have on the homes abutting the rear, because obviously proximity to that building has a lot to do with what you feel about an elevated building height, because as you know, typically as you go up in height with a variance, you would normally increase setback distance to compensate from the increase in building height. I understand completely that they're trying to accommodate the site. We have absolutely no qualms with that. Glad to see Pinehurst Elementary hopefully remain in Pinehurst, exactly where it is, adjacent to our property, so no issue with that. I do have some concerns, and full disclosure, I do this for a living. I'm a land use and development consultant, land use attorney for 40 years. I'm usually the one at the podium seeking the approvals for the plan. Very familiar with 22-acre school sites, agree with that. So the two-story footprint obviously makes sense. I was hoping it'd be a two-story footprint because that reduces actually the proximity and the physical impact on all of us. So I don't have any problem with that in concept. My concern about the building height was not yet having the site plan, which I was only able to find one before the meeting. And I understand that they're going to have to go with this minimum 25-foot rear setback and the 20-foot buffer because they barely have enough room as it is. My thought would be is if we're going to have that bare minimum buffer there for those homes on Everett and you know, our backyard's back right up to it, and if they're going with increased building height, I'd be very curious to see or know what is the landscape buffer plan. Are they planting in that 20-foot buffer? Are they doing anything to screen the rear of our homes from the school and the proximity of the school and the increased height on the building? We're going to have that multi-purpose field, which means when the kids get out of class and they're ready to run and scream, they're going to be right there. And I get that, and that's fine. I have no problem with kids. We have quite a few of them ourselves, although they're all grown. The other thing on the site plan that I just got a few minutes ago is it looks to me like the only fencing designated on at least the sheet we've given is designated R for a code, which is a 4-foot ornamental aluminum fence. I'm a little surprised that their fencing in the rear between our properties and the school is only a 4-foot ornamental aluminum fence. And this, of course, doesn't demonstrate any tree buffer, any hedge buffer, anything of that sort to either absorb noise and or give you a little bit of a visual buffer. So that's my concern. No substantive objection, but feel like if they're going up in height and if they're going to be that close to us, someone here, whether it's this board or the site plan review, someone needs to see a landscape plan and a buffer plan. And this demonstrates nothing between us and them other than a 4-foot aluminum ornamental fence, which means an open fence. So that's my concern.
Okay, your questions would be more appropriate to be addressed at a public hearing that the Planning and Zoning Board will hear on a general concept plan sometime down the road. There are site plan issues. Tonight, we're only concerned with the variance of roof height.
Well, with respect, yes and no. And again, from doing this for a living, if you're going to increase and grant a variance to roof height, any variance can be conditioned with reasonable conditions. We all know that. And if you're increasing the height, then the proximity of a higher building to the adjacent property actually is a question, and you normally address that one of two ways. You either move the building back and increase the required setback. For example, 1 foot for every 2 feet of building heights is a pretty standard norm. Or if you don't have the room to do that for the reasons that have been expressed, then you require buffer, landscape buffer, other planting protection. So with all respect, I do believe you can procedurally condition a height variance on additional buffer requirements, additional setback requirements, or fence requirements. So I think this is probably the proper forum to consider addressing that. You're right, if you decline to impose any condition, then of course we can seek to bring it up again on the site plan, but it would certainly be legally and procedurally correct to impose some buffer requirement in order to give them the additional building height.
You are correct.
That's done all the time.
And I can address some of the procedures to Mr. Tu as well as the board and those in audience today. As you know, I understand that not everyone here is quite up to speed on what our development ordinance requires as far as which piece of the process comes first and what is required at that time. Before a site plan, this particular project will require a major site plan per our development ordinance. Any disturbance of greater than 2 acres is deemed a major site plan, which means it has to be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Board in a public hearing and then recommended to the Village Council, where they would decide on major site plan at a public hearing as well. Before a site plan can really fully go through that process, it will have to be compliant with the base zoning regulations, which this particular proposal does not quite meet. Therefore, the variance would be needed before a favorable recommendation or an approval of a major site plan by Village Council. And our ordinance requires that a major site plan be accompanied with a general concept plan. A general concept plan is required to show general location of proposed fencing, landscape areas, and the actual dimension of the buffers itself, not necessarily the number of required plantings. Also, before this project can receive full site plan approval, it will need to go through review of the Historic Preservation Commission, as again, I know that this material was presented to the board in their packet, because the property is located within the local historic district. And once all those processes are passed through, then full construction drawings can be submitted to staff for final review and issuance of the full executed site plan. And those full construction drawings will be detailed engineering, stormwater control measures, as well as a landscape plan that will have to be submitted and meet our standards, which, Mr. Tu, I'll just kind of hit some of those requirements for you. As you indicated, it would be a 20-foot buffer around those adjacent properties that are zoned residential. Within that buffer, 1 longleaf pine with a minimum size of 3-inch caliper at planting are required per 200 square feet of the buffer area. So that wouldn't necessarily be the linear area, that would be the total square foot of the buffer area itself. 2 understory trees, a minimum of 2-inch caliper, are required per 500 square feet of the buffer area, one of which is to be an evergreen species that is not a pine. Trees shall be distributed along the entire length and width of the planted buffer, and due to unique characteristics of site or design objectives, alternative plant mixes and spacing may be approved by the village planner. and shrubs a minimum of 24 inches in height of a variety that can be expected to reach 4 to 5 feet in height and 3 feet in width within 3 years of planting shall be provided, and they shall not be planted closer than 6 feet to newly planted trees nor within the drip line of existing hardwood trees. And they shall also be distributed along the entire length and width of the planted buffer, preferably in a naturalistic grouping so as not to create a hedge-like condition. And they shall be provided at 1 per 75 square feet of buffer area. Of course, it is worth mentioning that a 30% reduction of those planting requirements can be met if there are proposed alternative landscaping plans or some sort of fencing is also proposed with that. So
Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
I also want to take some time to review the variance procedure that this board has to go by, and to also provide some information for the applicant and those in attendance as to what we really have to do and what burden of proof lies on the applicant so that we can grant the variance, which has to be by a supermajority of the board, meaning 5 affirmative votes. The variance process is intended to provide relief from the zoning requirements of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. In those cases where strict application of a particular zoning requirement will create a practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship, prohibiting the use of land in a manner otherwise allowed under the PDO. It is not intended that variances be granted merely to remove inconveniences or financial burdens that the zoning requirements of the PDO may impose on the property owners in general. Rather, it is intended to provide relief where the zoning requirements of the PDO render the land difficult or impossible to use because of some unique physical attribute of the property itself or some other factor unique to the property for which the variance is requested. Once the application is heard and competent testimony is considered, the board can and does have the authority to subpoena additional witnesses and may request additional information, can continue the public hearing on the requested variance, can conduct an additional public hearing on the application, grant the requested variance, deny the requested variance, grant the requested variance with conditions. In granting any variance, the Zoning Board of Adjustment may attach appropriate conditions, provided that the conditions are reasonably related to the request. Any approval or denial of the request shall be by a resolution, accompanied by written findings of fact that the variance meets or does not meet each of the standards set forth in standards of review described below, and stating the reasons for such findings. As I mentioned, the Zoning Board of Adjustment shall not grant any variance unless there's a concurring vote of at least 4 of the 5 members. And the standards that have to be met to grant a variance are as follows. 1, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. It shall not be necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of the variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. 2, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography. Hardships resulting from personal circumstances, as well as hardships resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood or the general public, may not be the basis for granting a variance. 3, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The act of purchasing property with knowledge that circumstances exist that may justify the granting of a variance shall not be regarded as a self-created hardship. and 4. The requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. I want this thing to get approved, but in my opinion, I haven't heard much that addresses these 4 particular standards that we have to consider before the variance is voted on. Now, I know that your application contains some information that address those 4 comments. And I will say again that I'm not myself certain that you have adequately addressed all those 4 standards. And you certainly have the opportunity to do that now if you would like. I'm sure you would
Happy
like.
The,
All right, answer the question, unnecessary hardship will result from the strict application of the ordinance. What is the hardship if we don't approve it?
The hardship is how would we on this site, which we are trying to manage and secure everything in here that's needed for a successful school operation of this size, how would we find additional square feet to bring elements to a lower level? That would require us to have to try to find ways to spread the building out even further, impacting some of the other aspects of the site. We have no room to do anything forward of the site with the drop-off and pickup requirements, as well as the bus service and staff parking requirements. By creating other lower elements that would dramatically impact the footprint of the building, also has an impact to the opportunity for the exterior areas. We have, in the very beginning, before we even started this project, we looked at where it made sense to build this school. We knew we'd have to build a new school. And through our analysis, using consultants involved in the process from ORED up at North Carolina State University, it had been deemed that this site is the best location to put the new school. And so by trying to accommodate the needs to fit within this site, we would either be compromising our ability to serve the students with enough of an outdoor activity spaces, or potentially worse, impacting our ability to drive, bring traffic off of the roadways and onto the site. Impacting the footprint creates those struggles with that issue. It would potentially create opportunities for the mechanical units to increase in size, because if you put them at the ends of the building, they may have to serve longer distances. The solution right now is economical means for construction, that you're utilizing areas that you're already building. So my glasses, I need to get a new prescription. Can you make that just a little bigger for me?
Did the Board of Education pursue the possibility of purchasing additional adjoining properties?
We did not entertain that thought as to the nature and makeup of the community to try to acquire established homes from the adjacent neighbors to raise and demolish and to expand. There was a cost associated with the projects that we wanted to make sure were economical to the taxpayer. Yes, it's a department of North Carolina State University, ORED, Operational Research Education, drawing a blank, ORED. They perform these services with multiple school districts across North Carolina, South Carolina, and in Virginia as well. And where they work with the Board of Education and staff on determining, based off of projected growth over a 10-year period, ideal locations to centralize schools within the master plan.
you have any reports or any sort of factual information that you may have gathered from them that would help our cause today?
And those were all presented to the Board of Education, goodness, 2015 maybe, so we'd have to bring those forward. I don't have them with me today.
You also mentioned economical restraints of maybe the changes of the building that would be faced. Do you have any information, factual information, driven the economics that would hurt this or drive up the cost of the building by changing the necessary changes to lower the roof?
Before you answer that, just let me
Give me.
advise that economic conditions don't enter into considerations on variances of this type.
Understand. Thank you. And then my last question really, and forgive me, I say this so hardly, Brent, are you a registered architect, or do you have anything that maybe we should consider that you would be an expert in your field?
I'm a registered architect.
Registered architect as well. And just a procedure question, and forgive me for this, for everybody, but can we consider the applicants themselves as expert witnesses?
Oh, certainly.
Just for clarity, for my clarity. Okay.
The only other options we would have would be to consider lowering the floor-to-floor heights, but we cannot lower those far enough to maintain the roof pitch to get within the variance height. So we have that restriction on that part to that. It's not easy. This project was not out of the gate. We've had a great dialogue so far tonight. It's been a lot of work to try to find ways to accommodate this and keep it in its current location of how it serves the greater community at large and meets our needs as far as the strategic location when you combine it with the other 3 elementary school projects we're doing.
Given the site, are there any circumstances that you could imagine? Okay. Is that okay? Oh, yeah. Given the site, are there any circumstances that you know of or could imagine that would have allowed you to build a school that would meet the requirements of this community without going to this height?
Based on what we've learned throughout the development process of designing the school on this restrictive site, we have not discovered a way to meet that need, which is what brought us here tonight with that need. We, as I mentioned before, we are well below the optimal size of acreage that you would want for single-story solutions. We would end up with a 2-story solution regardless here. And we have done everything we can to try to lower the impact of that by making sure we have our floor-to-floor heights sized just enough to conceal all the mechanical and utility features in the building above ceilings that are not lowered down to 8 feet. We incorporate daylighting into every classroom, so we have ceiling heights that we need to try to maintain in those spaces of approximately 10 feet minimum, so we can get daylighting thrown into all areas of this classrooms all the way across all floor area. So by trying to accommodate the needs and the best environment for learning and instruction, we have met what we would deem as the minimum requirement.
So, an unnecessary hardship would result if we are unable to find a way to issue a variance on this, given the mission of the Village of Pinehurst to educate its youth.
That would be my suggestion, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Would you address, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah? Alex, thank you. I wanted to address the 2 concerns that the gentleman brought up. One was the buffer regarding the trees and shrubs that we're going to be planting. You did a great job of reading through what the requirements are and letting us know, hey, that's going to be part of the process. And the second part was the ornamental fence. And I know we're at a stage in the design process where this is probably not final. Is there something in the fencing requirements that are also going to have something addressed with regard to the 4-foot aluminum ornamental fence?
Sorry about that. So any proposed fencing would need to be reviewed and made sure that it is compliant with, and a certificate of appropriateness issued for the Historic Preservation District's standards and guidelines, as well as that it meets the requirements of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. So it's basically, if the applicant were to propose a fence, we would just make sure that it was a selected fence that meets base requirements. Now, they can propose to place a fence within a proposed buffer area and also get a reduction on the buffer. So a fence can only be placed in a buffer if it is actually part of that buffering requirement.
And I imagine this has to be integrated with safety concerns about the requirements for the perimeter of the school.
Correct.
So, okay, so that's going to be looked at as well.
That's correct.
Okay.
And at this point, they're required to show all proposed locations. There's, some stormwater control areas there on the site that would obviously, for a safety standpoint, need to be fenced in. And I'm guessing the 4-foot aluminum to resemble the wrought iron look is, as you see around a lot of swimming pools, it's a less obtrusive visually, but it also provides the safety requirement that's needed there.
Understood. Thank you.
What are the peculiar and particular conditions on this site that create the need for this variance? Where you cannot meet the building height per regulation?
The obvious is the size of the site. Had we had the opportunity for more land, we had more opportunity to spread the building out. And without that opportunity on the size of the site, it has created this situation. Again, it's a beautiful site. It is a level site, and we don't find a lot of those in all our places. Just go down the road to our new Southern Pines site, and that drops 80 feet from front to back. This is a great site for a new school to be placed on. It also has great relationship to the community and the neighborhood there. It's accessible via a lot of walking trails and bicycling. That's a plus in this location. When we took an initial look at the area at large to try to identify larger parcels of land, we found that they would not be in areas that had the ability for walking, for biking, as such. They would pretty much be all vehicular served. And so we came back to this numerous times, and through our working with the village, have so far, in my opinion, I believe that the board would support that as well, with a great opportunity to keep and maintain the presence here that not just serves the village, but a larger area as well. Had we had the opportunity for a larger site in this same location, it would have changed the design.
An advantage, do you think, is because it's been there for so long, traffic patterns have been established, people know how to get there and get away from there. Does that have any impact on the site?
The site is well served from multiple directions, and that is obviously one of the things we look at when we look at properties, is how easily served is it from all directions, because that's ideally where you want your students to come from. You don't want to locate it up against a barrier where you're only receiving students from one direction. And so this location between Route 2 to 11, servicing everything west of the circle over, it is an ideal location to draw. And if you go further and take a look at the work that's already started with the student reassignment, and you will see how that location is impactful for that opportunity.
What's the percentage of students that walk to the site?
Currently, we have quite a few students that walk. There's even a walking program that is done at the school. There are some students that ride their bikes. to here. I cannot give you an exact number at this moment. I can find that information out for you. But we do have a presence here, the current site of some students that are walked. Most of them are with their parents or in a group. And there's a lot of research and push for walking school districts. One of the benefits of some communities is the establishment of sidewalks or greenways along roadways. And with the beginning of the, I'm going to call it the greenway along Dundee down through there, that provides a great opportunity for access for walking communities.
Anybody have any more that want to question or offer?
I'm not sure I have a question, but I find sitting here that it's, I've been doing this for a little while, that I can't remember the last time that we listened to people who had no vested interest in the outcome of the decision other than service to this community and maintaining the texture, if you will, of the community. We don't have many young people, didn't when the school was built, and I just I find it very unique to have you sitting here and refreshing to do something that serves the community. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any more questions with the board? Okay, I would like to have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved?
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Motion is second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Time for discussion and deliberation amongst ourselves. I guess I would start off by asking if everyone understands the procedure, the conditions that have to be met, and have they met them or have they not met them, or if they have met them, what kind of conditions need to be included with the approval.
In my opinion, I don't think we need to have any conditions on it. It sounds like the gentleman's concern.
Talking to my, oh, it is public. The public hearing's closed.
All right, okay. So
But
in
the
my,
tape isn't closed.
good enough. I'm usually loud enough. I don't need one of these things. But in my opinion, I don't think we need to put any conditions on it. I think that Alex reviewed, in my opinion, what was needed and addressed the gentleman's concerns for the buffer, that's going to be addressed. There's going to be a process for that, and it's already incorporated. So in my opinion, they've met the requirements, and I think we can move forward.
I don't want to be reprimanded. I agree.
Just from the board's opinion, are there any factual evidence that we can include in some decision today? Anybody?
The function, the size of the
Factual
building
evidence.
is driven by 800 students, student-teacher ratios, classroom sizes, and the site constraint. And so that combined drives the building footprint. And so I think that's been taken into account.
That's what we've derived as the fact, okay.
I think so.
Sure, I agree.
I think they've done a great job of making it fit on this piece of property, and a building that's 9 feet above our standard is a little disconcerting, but knowing that it's a school and it's going to support the neighborhood and the village, and they've worked so hard to keep it to be a minimum, I commend them for that.
I am concerned with the absence of the facts brought to us as a board today. But we do have 2 expert witnesses that I think that we can consider, expand on some of that and their feelings on some of the things that are important, like safety. You mentioned driving the building up and the size of the location.
And some of us have worked for architecture firms that have designed schools.
Sure. That helps.
And I think there is a hardship here of trying to meet all the requirements on such a small piece of property.
Yes.
All right, are we in a position to, motion to approve? And if the motion is to approve and it carries, we need to read the four standards that are shown at the end of your packet that is headed by a decision letter of the Board of Adjustment of the Village of Pinehurst. Looks like this. So you have to read each one of them and say whether they did meet it or did not meet it.
And Chair, if I could just make sure before there's a motion before the board, I would just like any such motion to have the point of clarity that you're making a motion, what that motion is. Because this is a dimensional requirement, let's be specific. The application does have a 44-foot, 10-inch, I think. So if the board would consider any other dimension other than that, make sure that that is very clear and specific, or if it is that specific, that the applicant has proposed to be specific at what that would be. And also to clearly say that you would adopt the following findings of facts as you go through that written decision document that Chair Sanawaso just shared with you.
Do we have a motion and a second?
Yeah.
Let me have it.
I'm ready to start reading. So I move that we approve the variance request for the property at 100 Dundee Road with the following, at the request for a change in a variance to 44 feet, 10 inches. I would say that unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. The hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, and the hardship did not result from action taken by the applicant or the property owner, and the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved.
Without any conditions.
Without any conditions.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion is second. All in favor? I'm going to call a roll call vote. Mrs. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Hooper?
Yes.
Mr. Stryberg? Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Sanawaso? Yes. Motion is unanimous. Variance to exceed the maximum building height to a height of 44 feet, 10 inches is approved without conditions. Good luck, folks. See you in a few weeks.